Get your hand off my penis! This is the bloke who got me on the penis before. Now, get your hands off me.
Hello everyone. So I decided to make this video after putting out a little poll on my Twitter account to see how many people would be interested in me doing a summary of the first 50 films that I've watched in this book, the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die 2011 edition. 2011 edition means it ends with something like True Grit or something ridiculous like that. Yeah, it actually does, True Grit. So I'm not going to waffle on. I've put all of my more in-depth reviews, I suppose, on my Twitter account. If you want to see it, link below, but most of you probably come from Twitter. So I am just going to go through the films from 1 to 50. I've got my laptop over here because I'm going to need some prompts because I may not remember all of the films and what I thought about them. And I'm just going to do a bit of a nutshell review for you, and hopefully this video won't go on too long, won't be too boring. And the idea is that I do this for every 50 installments in the book, so it's taken me about 7 or 8 months to get to this point. So I guess the next video will be in another 7 to 8 months once we hit 100. So without further ado, let's begin. Number 1 on the list is Le Voyage dans la Lune. It's a very, very short film by Georges Méliès or Méliès. It lasts about 12 minutes. It's wacky as hell. It's French. Sorry about the traffic. It's so noisy here. It's a French film. It's wacky. They get board a rocket ship to the moon. They land in the moon's eye. Lots of people know that iconic scene where the rocket literally lands in the moon's eye. They get on the planet. They discover some aliens. They bring them back to Earth. It's wacky. It's nuts. I loved it. It was 10 out of 10. It showed what cinema could do. It was an incredible introduction to the media of cinema. My cat's over here playing up, so that's why I'm looking over here. So that was that. Number 2, The Great Train Robbery. Again, another short film, 11-12 minutes long. And it's what it says on the tin, a great train robbery. We see the bandits hold up a train, they shoot a couple of people, and then inevitably they get shot and killed themselves. I guess it was technically the first gangster film, maybe. You're watching bad guys, I don't know, perhaps. And it ends with the iconic shot of the guy firing his gun directly at the camera. And apparently it scared people so much in the cinema that everyone who was watching pulled out their guns and started shooting at the screen. Crazy Americans, I know, it's crazy Americans. It was epic, it was fantastic, it was great. Another perfect form, what the media could do. So it was great. Two films that were a strong start on the list. Number 3 had to come along and mess things up a little bit. The Birth of a Nation. Oh man, D.W. Griffith. A 3-hour epic, silent epic, which was absolutely fantastic technically. Narratively, I suppose, what he did over 3 hours, the course of 3 hours, visually was fantastic, never before seen. It's the most racist film I've ever seen in my life. Lots of you will know about The Birth of a Nation. Spike Lee last year spoofed it, or not spoofed it, but like referenced it in Black Klansman, showing all the Klansmen literally watching it and cheering it. It was basically a promotional video for the KKK. So it's kind of included in the list because of its technical feats, but it is incredibly offensive. They literally have black guys like in the Houses of Parliament over there in the US eating chicken legs, feet up on the tables, chasing women around, and then the white men swooping to save the day. Awkward as hell. Really awkward. Technically brilliant, but really awkward. Number 4 is a film called Les Vampires. This was 6 hours long. It was a collection of like 20-minute shorts all melded into one. They played in I believe French cinema over the course of about 1.5 years, 2 years, and would normally screen every fortnight or something like that, or every month. And this is basically a compendium of all of them. And essentially what it is it's a vampire. A group of people who are known as vampires, but really they're just like a criminal underworld gang. They're not actual vampires. And you follow the exploits of a police officer and his like assistant Mazamet as they try and foil all of their escapades. It's quite fun for the first 2 to 3 hours. The second 3 hours becomes a bit of a struggle. But it did introduce us to Irma Vep, who is one of the first, I guess, female iconic characters. She was a powerful character. She was a female criminal who essentially led the group for many of the short films within it. Anyway, Les Vampires, fantastic if you can watch it, but you only need to have your entire weekend free for it. Next up on the list, number 5, is Intolerance. I can't remember this one too well, but it's another D.W. Griffith film. He sort of made it in response to the backlash that he received for Birth of a Nation, and Intolerance was meant to show intolerance through the ages. So he picks 4 different time periods and shows how society was intolerant. But D.W., you are fucking intolerant. Don't be so stupid. Another 3-hour film ain't gonna fix that. It was dull as hell, it was on the nose, and again, technically very brilliant, but very fucking dull. That's sort of typical of him in the early years. Number 6, here we go, a good one. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Now, I studied that at film school like over 10 years ago. Probably one of the first horror films. German expressionism, everything looked very cool, very unique. It was about a somnambulist, like a sleepwalking zombie who was under the mind control of Dr. Caligari, and it has a kind of twist ending. It looks very cool, very creepy. I loved it. It's very good. Highly recommend it. Number 7 is Broken Blossoms. Now, this is D.W. Griffith again. I know he's all over the list at first, unfortunately. But this is his best film. This is the best film of his that I saw. It wasn't very long. It was like an hour and a half to 2 hours. It was set in London. Again, it was racist because it had a white guy playing a Chinese guy. What, D.W., you can't fucking get it right. But the story at least was a bit more interesting. It followed this Chinese guy, white Chinese guy, who ran a shop, who moved from China to London, and he falls in love with a girl who is the daughter of a boxer, and this boxer's a real brute. It's a fantastic film. It's very enjoyable. D.W. finally got it right, but still included the racism. Fucking hell. Oh, Jesus. Number 8 is another D.W. Griffith. See what I'm saying? Way Down East. Look, I can't even really remember this film. I know I rated it low. This is what I said. Probably the worst D.W. Griffith film on the list so far. Tired, dull, and bloated. Yeah. Broken Blossoms was far more intimate and enjoyable. Points scored for the incredible ice flow scene only. Oh yeah, it ends with a woman on a ice flow going down the river. It must have been pretty incredible to film. The film, I can't remember nothing about it. It was boring as hell. Forget it. We're moving on. Number 9, Within Our Gates. Now this is interesting because this is the first African American movie to be made. Unfortunately, the story isn't very strong. But I wanted to give it points at the time because I enjoyed seeing representation that early on. I didn't think that they were allowed to make many films that early on. I thought they'd been suppressed, but actually this one was in 1920 and it got out there. I can't remember everything. I've said the perfect moral response to the racist Birth of a Nation. Yeah, there you go. Doesn't match the technical or narrative brilliance of it. So there we go. It's not racist, but it's not as good a film technically. So it was fine. Number 10, The Phantom Carriage. Now this is another sort of like ghost story. It's not a horror story. I believe it's set in the streets of London, but a guy who's made some mistakes and is sleeping rough on the streets dies. And when he dies, the ghost carriage comes for him and it shows him what is happening in his life around that time. Sort of like a precursor to Dickens, or maybe it was inspired by Dickens. I'm not sure when Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, but it has that kind of film. And it's a very good film. I enjoyed that one a lot. I'm speeding up a little bit because I don't want to linger too long. Number 11, Orphans for the Storm, D.W. Griffith. Again, I think there's only one more after this. I hope there's only fucking one more after this. I've said it isn't his worst work, but the intimate drama of the Gish sisters at the heart of the story is suffocated by outdated set pieces. All I can remember is it was a melodrama, it was real period costumes. It was 2 sisters who got split up and somehow were reunited. It wasn't very good. I can't remember anything unique about it. The Smiling Madame Budeau is at number 12. The Smiling Madame Budeau was very interesting. From memory, it's only about 30 minutes long, and it's about a husband and wife, and the husband is sort of a bit of a clown, a bit of a joker, and the wife is growing very, very tired of him to the point where she actually loads a gun and hopes that he will kill himself, because every time they have an argument, he pulls a gun out of his drawer and holds it to his head and says, "Do you want me to do this?" But he never does it. But she puts a bullet in the gun one day, hoping that he will, but he turns the gun on her, and I'll leave it there. It was interesting. It was very, very interesting. Number 13 on the list is Dr. Möbius the Gambler. This is a German film, and I think it was done by Fritz Lang, who went on to do Metropolis, which we'll get to. Dr. Möbius the Gambler is like 3-4 hours long, and it is about, it's sort of like Les Vampires, a guy who dons disguises and is wanted by the police, and they're like 20-30 minute shorts. And he's doing a new scam in every sketch, and he's dressing himself up as a different person in every episode. It's fine. It's not as good as Les Vampires, but it's shorter, which is something. Number 14, The Nook of the North. Studied this at film school as well. This is probably the first documentary there ever was. It followed the Inuits, or as they were saying at the time, the Eskimos. It's an hour spent with this family a mother, a father, and the two children, showing how they survive day to day. I mean, it's fantastic because it's a documentary captured that early, showing what life was like in like the early 1920s for Eskimos. However, I do not believe for a second that much of what happens in this really was happening. I feel like it was recreations because it just, a lot of it doesn't ring true. Apparently, like a year afterwards, they all died as well. So, happy times. Number 15 on the list is Nosferatu. My favourite film that I have watched so far on this list. It is the brilliant Nosferatu. You all know it. If you don't know it, you've seen a million things that have been inspired by it, not least Dracula. Nosferatu was made based on Bram Stoker's Dracula. He couldn't get the rights. What's the name of the guy now? Murnau, Jesus Christ. He couldn't get the rights to Dracula, so he just renamed the vampire Nosferatu and basically made the story of Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's incredibly well done. It's super creepy. Max Schreck played the vampire at the time. There's since been a film came out called Shadow of the Vampire with John Malkovich and Eddie Izzard and Willem Dafoe, and it plays on the idea that Max Schreck actually was a vampire, and they kept the fact that Max Schreck was a vampire from the rest of the cast while they were filming it. Anyway, Nosferatu, super creepy, super brilliant. Go and see it if you haven't. Number 16, Foolish Wives. I don't really remember where this is from, like Serbian maybe or something like that. It's filmed in Monte Carlo. I don't really remember too much of it. I gave it a 4 out of 10. It wasn't very good. I've just said it's a foolish film by a foolish director who foolishly decided to star in it. Let's just move on. Foolish Wives is not one to speak about. Oh no, I've totally, sorry, bear with me now. I've totally gone off the list. Foolish Wives is at number 16, sorry. Number 17 is a documentary come recreation. It's something called Haxan. It's like a documentary on the occult, on witches, on ghouls, on like wizards and stuff like that. And I quite enjoyed it. It was like half documentary, half like infomercial, half recreation of things that probably didn't happen. But it's interesting. And I first saw it on the Blair Witch Project behind the scenes documentary like 20 years ago. So it was interesting to see it in its entirety now on this list. Number 18 is Our Hospitality. It's the very first Buster Keaton film on the list. I've always been a massive Charlie Chaplin fan. I'd never seen Buster Keaton before, and Our Hospitality was the perfect introduction to him. It's only like an hour or so long, but his character, his slapstick, the joke, and the story was all really nice, really heartwarming, and I thought, what a great introduction to Buster Keaton. Sadly, the follow-on Buster Keatons I saw weren't that great, but we'll get to them. Number 19 is La Roue. Now, this one's really interesting. La Roue means the wheel. It's a French film. I cannot find a version with English subtitles, English intertitles. So I watched this like 2-3 hour film, French film, having no clue what was going on. I watched it in its entirety. I got the sense that something beautiful was going on, but I have no idea what was happening. There was lots of trains wheels and an old man at the end and a young girl who comes to him at the end, and there seems to be a very emotional moment, but I don't know what the fuck's going on. So I hope to track that down and actually watch it and understand it, but I need to get the English intertitles. If anyone's seen it or anyone knows where I can get it, go for it, let me know. Number 20, The Thief of Baghdad. Now this was Aladdin before Aladdin was Aladdin. It's, what's the name of the guy? Oh, come on, what's the name of the guy in this? Douglas Fairbanks, who did a load of stunt work in this film, climbing ropes, jumping from buildings, swashbuckling. I mean, he looks incredible. It is essentially the Arabian Nights tale on a soundstage. Douglas Fairbanks did all these stunts. The sets were incredible. The film is just fun. It feels like a fun adventure film. I strongly advise you to go and check that one out. That's one of the highlights on the list, The Thief of Baghdad. Number 21, The Strike. This is Sergei Eisenstein's The Strike. I remember seeing something of this at film school as well. I'm going to stop saying film school because I sound like a pretentious snob, but that's not why I'm saying it. I mean it. It's basically about the brutalities workers suffered in Russia in the 1920s. Kind of like a propaganda piece, and it's quite well done, but there's a bit of animal cruelty in there that I don't particularly like, so we'll move on from that. Next on the list is number 22, Greed. Now, Erich von Stroheim directed Greed. I started watching this film and I really didn't know what to think. Like an old guy who's a dentist or a dentist assistant, a young girl comes in and gets in the dentist chair and he seems like particularly infatuated by her and you think he's going to kill her, but then he ends up marrying her within like 30 minutes. I'm like, what sort of film is this? And the film gets darker and darker and more like, God, you ever seen The Proposition? Like really sparse Western where people are in situations but their feelings are sort of like being dragged over the coals. That's what this was like. And by the end of it, I was like, this is incredible. One of the best films I've seen on the list. I don't want to spoil too much, but it goes from a doctor's chair through to the vast expanse of the desert in the baking hot sun. It's really, really well done. So I really liked that. Greed, it was called. Number 23, Sherlock Jr. So this is probably the second best Buster Keaton film that I've seen on the list. It was good. He basically melds cinema, watching stuff going on the cinema screen. He steps into the cinema screen and becomes Sherlock Holmes or Sherlock Jr. The stunt work's quite good. It's quite funny, but it's not great. It's not great. Number 24 is The Last Laugh. All right, so this is from the director of Nosferatu, Murnau again, and it's about a sort of like doorman, sorry, of a building who is coming to the end of his tenure, and he gets promoted to toilet assistant, and it's about the sort of like fall from grace that he suffers and whatnot. I didn't really care for it. I got the gist of the film, but if it had ended 10 minutes before it actually did end, it would have had a much more bittersweet ending. But as it is, they tacked on this ending, which sort of is like a fantasy ending where he wins the lottery and actually he's okay and he goes to the hotel and he eats fine meals and all that. Life ain't like that, Murnau. You should have stuck to your guns. In fact, Murnau was forced to do that by the studio, so it wasn't totally his fault. But it was fine. I just didn't like the ending. Number 25 is Seven Chances, Buster Keaton. Now you're wearing thin, Buster. So this one is, he needs to marry a woman by 7 o'clock that night in order to inherit £7 million or something like that. And it's a big farcical thing where he's trying to find a woman to marry by 7 o'clock that night. And it's just a bit dull, really. There's no real good laughs in there. And there's one particularly racist moment where he's just chasing after every woman he can. And he chases after this one and she turns around and she's a black woman and he quickly turns away and walks away. I'm sure it got big laughs at the time. Fucking racist now, isn't it? Right, number 26, we're halfway through. Number 26, The Phantom of the Opera. Having never seen the play, having never seen the opera or any iteration of this, I didn't know what to expect. So I was quite pleasantly surprised. There was a great revelation where his mask comes up and we see the monster beneath the mask, and he really is a monster in it. I don't know what it's like in the play or whatever, but he actually is a monster in it. And Lon Chaney is the guy who played him. And he really had loads of prosthetics to make his face look really weird. It was quite unique and distinct. So I enjoyed that. Number 27, Battleship Potemkin. This is the last time I'm going to say this. I watched this at film school, mainly for the Odessa Steps sequence, which you've probably seen. And if you haven't seen, it inspired the scene in Untouchables where the baby carriage comes crashing down the stairs. Very, very good indeed. Lots of stuff aboard the Battleship Potemkin and the workers who strike and then go out to face the military presence on land. It's great, it's harrowing, it's kind of bleak. It was right up my street. Number 28, The Gold Rush. This is Charlie Chaplin, and like I said, I love Charlie Chaplin. However, when I re-watched this film for the first time in 15 years, I didn't enjoy it as much as I did the first time round. So I hope that's not going to be the case when I revisit other Chaplins. But it was not as funny as I remembered. So maybe not the best entry-level Chaplin. Number 29, The Big Parade. So this is kind of like the War is Hell film on the list. Or at least the first film to even really address war. But this is a guy who goes to war and he loses his legs. There's some emotion in it, and it's the first film on this list that actually made me want to cry. I had tears in my eyes, and that's a silent film from the 1920s, so that's saying a lot. Number 30, Metropolis. My second favourite film that I've seen so far. Absolutely incredible. The birth of science fiction. Without Metropolis, there is no Matrix, no Dark City. I'm going to miss everything. All the dark sci-fi films, Blade Runner, all of that, the foundation was laid with Metropolis. It is about a dystopian society, a dystopian world, where everyone slaves away for the big machine and is locked into their own way of working. Everyone's working, nobody's thinking, and then one day one guy decides to be free. And it's about the awakening of this city and all that entails. It is incredible, it is dark, and the version that I saw was absolutely fantastic. The score on it absolutely made it. I'm scared to watch it without the score that I saw. It's quite a modern score, but that sometimes happens with these silent films. Anyway, Metropolis was absolutely incredible. Now, on to the next one, number 31, Sunrise. Okay. So this is another F.W. Murnau film, great with Nosferatu, kind of okay with The Last Laugh, and then this one is like a 5 out of 10. A man tries to murder his wife, he isn't successful, and then he goes on a journey where he doesn't murder his wife, and he loves her by the end. Excuse me a minute while I pause this video. Okay, number 32 is The General. This is another Buster Keaton film. This one, all is set aboard a train. There's a few good set pieces on the train, but ultimately it's still not high levels of Chaplin. Chaplin now balancing out again and definitely on top above Keaton. There's some good bits of him sitting on the wheels as the train goes along and all that, but it's not that great. Number 33 is a film called The Unknown. Lon Chaney in it again, and this is a kind of carnival horror film where this carnival guy loves this woman and he essentially kills for her, I suppose he kills for her, but he does a few more things for her that involve bodily modifications, and when that doesn't impress her, he decides to bodily modificate other people. It was a lot of fun. It was a bit wacky. It was a lot of fun. Number 34, oh God, October, 10 Days That Shook the World. The worst out of the 50 films. Dull, propaganda, just an editing exercise. I hated it. Lots of flashy editing, but I could give a fuck what was going on. It meant nothing to me. Yeah, I hated it so much. Number 35, The Jazz Singer. Now the first talkie on the list. Now we're talking, literally. Al Jolson plays a jazz singer, Jewish jazz singer whose parents or father mainly don't really approve of what he's chosen to do in his life. But it's a really nice, quite heartwarming story. It shows him following his desires. You've got singing on record for the first on film for the first time, because they were able to record the singing and then sync the singing up with the soundtrack for the films. But because he spoke in between the songs and leading into the songs, there ended up being dialogue in film. So that's quite something to see. A little bit more racism for you. That's what you get in early Hollywood. He blacks up. He blackfaces. Yeah, he doesn't just blackface. He blackfaces for about half an hour. So that's annoying. Number 36, Napoleon. Okay, so this was 5.5 hours, and I had to pay a lot of money to get the Blu-ray for this because it was the only way that I could see it. It's essentially the life of Napoleon. It was incredible. It was hard going because I admit I'm not particularly interested in military history. I'm not interested in Napoleon. However, I was with him from his story as a child through to him. I'm lying if I say I remember the whole story. It was tough going, but visually it's very spectacular and I remember enjoying it. And there's an incredible scene at the end where the director, I've forgotten who it is, gets 3 cameras and lines them up to film this battle sequence, and then he lines the footage up in the edit. So what you see is one huge field war battle scene in a field. It looks fantastic, so it shows the inventiveness. It was quite incredible. Number 37, The Kid Brother. So this is a guy called Harold Lloyd that I'd never heard of before, following in the Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin footsteps. It was kind of fine. There was a bit of slapstick there, but he was a little bit more like a nerd. Like he didn't have like Keaton's stunt work, and he didn't have Chaplin's charm, so it didn't really work for me. The Kid Brother. Okay, sorry, I've had to edit this because it keeps cutting out. I haven't got enough space on the phone. Number 38, The Crowd. Okay, so this is a film about a guy who's in a shit job, sort of a shit marriage, and he's got a shit life, and he doesn't want any of that, and he wants to break out of it, but actually falls deeper into the trap and enters into a shitter marriage and gets lumbered with kids and a job he doesn't like, and it's all very depressing. It looks very dated in our post-American Beauty world, so it wasn't very good. Number 39, A Doctor New York. Well, this just had a guy who came off a ship, an unlikable, cocky little fuck who wandered into town, saved a woman from committing suicide, and then is like, let me marry this woman. And I don't know, it just didn't sit well with me. There's a lot of abuse potentially in the subtext. I didn't like that at all. Number 40, On Chien Andalou. So I believe this was Louis Buñuel. I don't know if Salvador Dali was involved in this, but it's like a 13-14 minute surreal short. That infamous shot of a razor blade slicing through the gelatin of the eye came from this film. That's fantastic. So On Chien Andalou is basically an Andalusian dog. There's lots of surreal stuff in there. I love surreal, and it's very, very short, so it kept my attention, and I rated it a lot. Same can't be said for what they did later. Number 41, The Passion of Joan of Arc. So I watched this on a Saturday morning. Worst kind of film to watch on a Saturday morning. It's essentially what happened to Joan of Arc and how she was dragged over the coals, how she was ambushed by the church, burnt alive. It's not Saturday morning viewing. It was also a real slog to get through, and I didn't really enjoy it, and I don't think it's particularly well made. Lots of talking heads. I gave it 4 out of 10. Doesn't say much for it. Number 42, Steamboat Bill Jr. Now this is Keaton again, and by this time I'm sort of like, okay, I feel like this is the last Keaton film I'm going to watch, so we'll give him points. He upped the stunt work on this. The storyline was a little bit better, but it was about time that he bowed out, and I'm hoping there isn't any more Keaton on this list, because this feels for me like the end of that era. It has the great shot of the house falling down, the front of the house falling down, and Keaton is standing in the doorway as it crashes over his head. Very good. Number 43, Storm Over Asia. So this is a Mongolian-made film, and it's about the rise of Genghis Khan. It was actually pretty interesting, but it was too long, and for large spells we were just watching like the puppet masters who were controlling him, and I wasn't really interested in that. I'd rather have seen the Genghis Khan story. But there's enough in there to be interesting, but it's not a great film. Number 44, Blackmail. This is one of Alfred Hitchcock's very first films, and this is the very first British talkie. And in true Hitchcock style, he goes all out. The whole thing is talking. There's dialogue throughout the whole thing. So this is probably the first film, it is the first film on the list where you hear dialogue all the way through. And the story has enough twists and turns, and there's enough in there for you to see everything that inspired the rest of his catalogue throughout the rest of his career. It's a really good film. I recommend it highly, and it winks at its audience along the way. Very, very enjoyable. Excuse me. So go and check that out. Number 45, Man with a Movie Camera. So this was just a guy in the Czech Republic, I think, who took his camera out and he filmed like 6-second shots of things out on the street from morning till night, again and again and again. But he also filmed an actor who essentially was him with a camera in the scenario. So I guess it was sort of to show the prevalence of the camera in modern day society at that time. However, like the camera was too obvious at that time, unlike now where you really can be anonymous and film things. The camera was everywhere. It was impossible not to go notice. So there's a lot of stagey stuff around it, but it's quite an interesting film. Okay, I'm really running out of battery, so I've got to make this quick now. That cut out again. Number 46, Pandora's Box. I did not like this film. Essentially, it's about a prostitute who is sleeping with all sorts of guys, and then one guy says he's getting married, and she gets really jealous, basically sabotages the relationship, marries him, he spirals down, wants to kill her, ends up dying himself. The woman then runs off with the son to London, and Jack the Ripper kills her. That's the film. Sounds good when you say it like that. It ain't. Not when you're watching it for 2 hours. It's no fucking good. I very much dislike this film. This was one of the worst films. Don't watch it. Number 47, The Blue Angel. So this came straight after Pandora's Box, and you can tell that there's a change in the tide. So maybe this is why these films are on the list, is because, again, you've got a woman who's very comfortable in her sexuality. She's very wily, she's very seductive, and she seduces this professor who she works at a nightclub, and all the students of this professor have been watching her, and he comes to take them away, but she seduces him, and he ends up falling in love with her inevitably, doing everything he can for her, and then she tosses him to one side, and he becomes a clown in the cabaret act that is the Blue Angel Club. It has a very disturbing ending though, so it's quite good. It gets marks for that, but it's still, I didn't really enjoy it. This is where we're getting into a period of films that I don't quite enjoy on the list, right? I have a bad one about now. Sorry for the focus issues here. Number 48, Large Door. Buñuel and Salvador Dali. That's a real film that from before, Le Chien Andalou, which was like 12-13 minutes, great. This one, which is over an hour, I don't like it. I'm sure there's a lot that I don't get in it, and that's probably why. But I don't like it. It's essentially about a couple who are trying to have sex, I think, for the most part of the film, and everywhere they go, the church and families and society are telling them not to, but it just don't work. It's not an interesting film. There's lots of stuff going on that seems totally irrelevant, and it just didn't hold my interest. I couldn't wait for it to end, and it did. The only thing I remember in there is that there was a cow lying in a bed, and that was very good, actually. I like the cow in the bed. Number 49, Earth. So this is really weird and really difficult to talk about. I didn't like this film. It's set in Ukraine, and it's about the birth of industrial farming or collective farming, and how that pushed out rich farmers or something. didn't do it for me. It's that sort of Ukrainian-Russian brand of film where they focus on the masses rather than the individuals doesn't do it for me. I need individuals to focus on. I need a couple of people who I'm invested in rather than society. I didn't like it. It wasn't very good. A bit preachy. Which brings me to number 50 and the final film on this video. And we went out with a bang. It was Little Caesar. This is the first gangster film. Not The Great Train Robbery. Little Caesar. With Rico in it. This is fantastic. It is the precursor to Scarface. Not only the precursor to Paul Mooney's Scarface, but to Tony Montana as we know him, as Al Pacino. He doesn't exist without this guy. This sets the entire template for every gangster film that came afterwards. The Best Friend, the Rat, the Rise to Power, the Inevitable Fall, the Bosses, the nightclubs, the clothes, the advancement of weaponry. It's all there and it's incredible, and the gangster talk is fast and sharp shooting. It's brilliant. It's a perfect way to end, and I cannot wait to see what I'm going to see in the next 50 films, because I get a feeling that this is the birth of gangster cinema, and we're about to see a few more gangster films in the next collection, I would hope. So guys, that is my very, very quick, well not so quick, summary of the first 50 films. Thank you for watching. If you like it, you can follow my progress on my Twitter account, which is down there in the handle. And if you don't like it, you probably ain't watching this bit of the video. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in like a year when we do 51 to 100 of the 1001 movies you must see before you die, or before I die.